live, lovers. It's 9 o'clock. So we're doing it again because it's Monday. I need a hair so badly. It's now been 6 some odd months since I've had a haircut. I got my haircut right before quarantine because when I saw the coronavirus coming, I should have sold all my stocks. But what I actually did was say, wow, if we go into lockdown, I'm going to wish I had a haircut so that my hair is short. And that's what I did. But now I haven't had a haircut in like 6 months, and it's really hot here. There's a lot of hair. But I love my hair, so whatever. I'm not going to get into the hair stuff today. Instead, what I'm going to say is I got some good news and some bad news. The good news is Monday, we're doing the live. Bad news is basically everything else in the state of the world. So let's just get to it. Let's just start off with the easy stuff. So I don't know if you know this, but the U.S. Air Force has been doing, combat simulations of a live F-16 fighter pilot against AI. And guess what? AI smoked the human. So game over, folks. Terminators are officially better than human beings. We are not going to be able to compete in the AI-dominated kill machine future. So all those folks who are hoarding guns will last you for another couple of years until the robots come for you. And honestly, we talk about technology for I suppose for somebody who's largely known as a political person, I am pretty involved in the technology sector. I'm actually working for a tech startup right now. But we talk about technology a fair bit and how humans are generally prepared for the future. Deep fakes, all of the privacy infringements, pretty much all this stuff. And now we've got killer robots that are just way, way better than we'll ever be at shooting things. So personally, I find this really disconcerting. I don't know how other people feel, but I'm very unhappy about this. Anyway, take some comments and then we'll get to, actually, before we do comments, there is something that I really do want to address, which I think is just really important for all of us to understand, because we spoke about it in regard to the Democratic Party, and now the Republican Party has taken its own steps. And so remember how the Democratic Party had a national convention, and in fact, there was an election to choose the nominee, and we spoke about how you're not actually voting for the nominee, you're voting for delegates, and that those delegates are important because not only do they carry the voice of the electorate in selection of the presidential nominee, but they also carry the voice of the electorate, in this case, party members, because it's a party convention, to the party to hammer out that party's platform and determine what is important to that group. Now, this is really important because, one, it keeps your political parties in touch with actual voters, and two, it allows that political party to translate the needs of Americans into actual policy proposals. The Republican Party today basically abandoned everything it stands for. And I don't mean that figuratively, like, oh, they changed some of their party platform and made it the opposite. I mean, literally, they abandoned what they stood for, because this year, probably for the first time in its history, the Republican Party decided to scrap having a platform. Like, they will not have a platform. They will not have anything for which the party stands except for enthusiastic support of Donald Trump. Quote, enthusiastic support. Now, this is kind of like, this is kind of the worst, most terrifying situation you could be in the United States. Honestly, or in any democracy, really. You have to remember, the Republican Party started in the early 1800s with the platform of abolishing slavery or freeing slaves. You know, abolition came later on, but it was basically a anti-slavery party that wanted to partition the Union into slave states and free states, and then gradually became more and more abolitionist, leading up to the culmination in Abraham Lincoln's election. So I don't think there's ever been a real national party that didn't have an actual platform based on, what the members of that party were prescribing. And usually that has some connection to an interpretation of the Constitution and the values of the United States and how they are better for the people of the United States and for executing on, those ideals. Well, the Republican Party just scrapped all of that and said Donald Trump is, in a very literal sense, our dictator. Whatever he says goes. Now, that's making policy by fiat, right? The Republican Party now has no other purpose except to be a cult of personality for Donald Trump. This never goes well. Never has gone well in history. It is absolutely terrifying to watch happen. A major political party, which could actually win the White House, has just abandoned every principle. And again, I don't mean that hyperbolically. They literally abandoned the principles that they had put in their platform and just decided that one individual is going to set all of the moral and policy dictates of the party by himself. And they're just going to support him enthusiastically no matter what he does. I mean, it's actually incomprehensible. It's inconceivable. One, that Donald Trump is the one to pull this off, and two, that this is actually happening. It's absolutely frightening. What it would mean is that when Republicans, if Republicans won the White House or end up in Congress or in control of any state government, they have nothing that they've offered voters except for blind adherence to Donald Trump. Blind adherence. They're no longer a conservative party. They're no longer a party of personal responsibility. They're no longer a party of anti-deficit. They're no longer a Christian party. They're no longer a party of gun rights. They're literally nothing except a bunch of people who support Donald Trump. If there's any Republican out there who actually believes in things, they're not the party of small government. If there's any Republican out there who actually believes in things, now is the time to get out. Now is the time to get out. Okay. Simon Sachs says, Shalom, Shalom, Simon. Dorian, hey, are you covering the RNC convention? Trump is speaking every night. It does say something that Trump is speaking every night and they can't get any other speakers except for his family and administration. But that's kind of meaningless. Like, it is legitimately just the party of, it's terrifying. And the fact is, this dude could actually win because the Republican Party is still so well funded and has, extra country support, like from outside the country. Dorian asked, will something about the Belarusian protests with a Saturday in front of you? And probably do I want to go to the Belarusian protest with you in front of the UN on Saturday? I would consider it. I don't really believe there's much of a point. The best thing that we can do to support democracy in Belarus is to organize in the United States for a government that supports democracies. Going outside the UN and yelling a bit, and I cover this in my Organizing 101. There are only a very select few types of protests that matter. And I suppose the esoteric protest is not one of those. And most protests are sort of just limited to their core constituency, which speaks only to the population where it takes place. And so those sorts of protests I don't find particularly influential, much more bang for your buck to make calls for Joe Biden. Dorian, Lushenko seems to be cracking down. Yes, well, that is how autocrats are. Do you want a BJ's membership card? Yes, I do, because I want to order a 25-pound bag of rice that's $25, thereby saving me about 50% on a regular bag of rice that I might buy at my local supermarket. Dorian Key, when are self-driving cars going to come on a mass scale? Please. Now, I will say this. I don't think coronavirus has killed New York City. I don't think there's many things that can kill New York City. But the self-driving car is probably going to kill cities, because then you can be in the city in the morning and leave at night without any effort. And you'll no longer have to live in cities. people say you don't have to live in cities because of remote work, but you still have to live in cities to have the benefit of being around people. With self-driving cars, you no longer have to live in the city to have the benefit of being around people. For example, when you go out at night and get plastered, it's hard enough to get on the subway. At least you can get a taxi to take you home. But with self-driving cars, you just call up your self-driving car, maybe it's got a bed in it, and you can sleep on your way home, which 2 to 10 hours away. And you can just sleep. And you can be home in the morning, and you can just come back. And like self-driving cars, I think, the thing that will kill cities. Simon Sachs, Kant said God is dead. The GOP is dead. They have imploded. They no longer exist. No platform, no position, no party. They have an organizational framework to win elections. So as a party, maybe they don't exist, but as a cult of personality to elect Donald Trump, I'm afraid that they're still very much alive. Dorian Key, I got out when the Tea Party started taking over and when Jeb lost. When Jeb lost. Dorian Key, what do you think of Putin poisoning his top rival in Russia and putting him in a coma? Well, that's bad. I don't really know what response did you think you get out of me? That's a bad thing. It shouldn't happen, really, anywhere. Of course, I believe in democracy, and I know that we have conflicting views on this. But really, beating your rival through use of force and not at the ballot box through force of argument is bad, in my opinion. If Lukashenko is toppled, maybe authoritarians around the world will fall like dominoes. What if it's the key in the butterfly effect to defeating Trump? I find that unlikely. I find it much more likely that the situation in Belarus will continue to be muddied until something happens in November. And that the United States, as is often the case, will be the domino. As they say, this isn't about the United States, but it might as well be. When the United States sneezes, the world catches a cold. It's just the United States is such an important player on the world stage that I don't think the toppling of, let me put it this way, Belarus I don't think is Poland. Belarus is not Berlin. Ukraine was a much more likely toppler of autocracy. The Arab Spring was a much more likely toppler of autocracy. These were much bigger movements that had potential to be much more impactful. And they weren't. The fact of the matter is that autocracy is resilient. And so authoritarianism, rather, not autocracy. Authoritarianism is resilient. Far more resilient than those who think democracy is naturally occurring would have us believe. So without strong allies like the United States and the European Union, democracy is not going to likely take hold in a lot of places, particularly so long as authoritarian regimes around the world are pretty invested in propping up these really horrendous regimes. So again, I really think that our best bang for the buck, if we want to help Belarus, is to get a democracy-friendly government here in the United States. Dorian Key, we are raising money for protesters arrested by the authorities in Belarus. Again, well, look, for what? Like, if Belarus, do you think that their courts are independent and just? If you do, then sure, raise money for their bail, raise money for their attorney's fees. If not, direct that money towards winning an election here in the United States, which will have a very strong impact on how international relations proceed and beating back China and Russia's influence around the globe. So there you have it. Now, just a couple of things locally, now that we've exhausted the comments here, because I wanted to go on a whole spree about Belarus and authoritarianism. Just a few things for us to know about in NYC and really all over the place. Schools are reopening. This is quite a dangerous situation. I mean, depends who you ask, but I think most teachers think it's a dangerous situation. Certainly teachers it's been suggested that teachers purchase life insurance, which is basically an admission that you might die. There have been articles coming about teachers who are they're forced to go back to work, so they have to quarantine themselves at home. There was one today about one in Connecticut, I believe, who had set up a tent in her backyard because her husband's immunocompromised, and they're just going. She's basically not going to have contact with her family as long as she's teaching. Which honestly, the incredible sacrifices the teachers are being forced to make, just because a small segment of the population refuses to make any sacrifice, and the government refuses to put our money or its resources behind reconfiguring indoor environments in favor of tax breaks for mega corporations. It's just absolutely unconscionable that this is the way our country is operating. But all of this is to say that here in New York City, schools do seem to be on track to reopen. And the mayor announced today that any school can apply for a permit to close down the street around it to have outdoor teaching space. So there are schools that have yards, but if you don't have any outdoor space in which to hold class, you can apply for this permit to do outdoor teaching in the street and shut down that street. Now, super interesting because I don't know how they're going to do online teaching. I honestly don't know how they're going to do online teaching, period. Do half the students go in, and then stay home? And then there's two different teaching forces, one of which is teaching that day online, the other which is teaching in the class. Are you streaming the class setting? I don't know. It's a whole it's a freaking mess. Anyway, just so that you know, if you have a school in your area and they need outdoor space, they can now apply to get outdoor space in the street. Okay, more comments rolling in. Dorian, do you think Joe Biden will do anything to rock the boat and help Democrats in Belarus or Hong Kong? He is very much steady as she goes. In Belarus, he might, because he'll enjoy pushing back on Russia. Hong Kong, no, dude, Hong Kong. Okay, Belarus involves intervening perhaps in a sovereign nation which had a corrupt election, and everybody sort of agrees on this. There's a bit of precedence for that. Intervening in Hong Kong would mean going against a sovereign government which in its own, there aren't massive uprisings, and under its own rules, under its own internal paradigm is legitimate. The problem with Lukashenko is that under the internal paradigm of Belarus, Lukashenko is illegitimate. But China is just an authoritarian regime. And the United States is not going to just go in there and start busting heads because a small island off the coast of China doesn't like the fact that the legitimate government passed a law against its people. Belarus is an entirely different situation. So I think Biden might do something there. Michael Kaplan, you never got back to me. Read Donald J. Trump State Park. I don't see a thing. Can you just copy paste that question down here? I don't even see that comment. But Dorian has another comment or question. I don't think Joe Biden will make any bold global impacts, sadly. I'm only for him out of sheer decency rather than any bold policy or inspiration, as are so many of us. But what I can certainly say about Joe Biden is that, what I can certainly say about the global situation is that shoring up American democracy and ensuring that America has a strong, vibrant democracy and it can be successful again is one of the most powerful and important things that we can do for the democratic, little d democratic cause. Because ultimately, what makes people want to have a democratic government is not the ideals of freedom, but the ideals of success and economic prosperity, right? The reason authoritarians have so much succor right now is because China and Russia seem to be doing decently well, and that means that authoritarianism can be pitched as a model of government that actually works for the people. The case needs to be made that those forms of government do not work for the people, and that instead democracy is a more successful way of managing your country if you want to have a happy and prosperous population. Michael Kaplan, we take down Confederate monuments because they are racist traitors. We should rename the park for the same reason. We should rename all of our parks that are named after Donald Trump to something else. And I believe there's actually a bill. There's a Donald Trump State Park here in New York because Donald Trump gave a lot of money to it, and so he gets to name it after himself. And there is a bill to remove his name from it. Could you explain QAnon in detail for us, beginning to end? I don't really understand or get it. I've explained QAnon like 3 or 4 times. How are all the theories related and into a deep state? I'll explain QAnon tomorrow, and I'll post so that other people who are interested can like tune in, and I'll go into the whole QAnon thing, because I definitely find it interesting. But I'm not going to go into it tonight because, well, I'd rather just have an opportunity to promote that so that people can watch, and I only have to explain it one more time. Simon Sachs says, thanks, Ben. For what? I couldn't say. Republicans in North Carolina are canvassing door-to-door, while our campaign has committed completely virtual until the election. This might put us at a disadvantage. I don't want to say might put us at a disadvantage. It's a huge disadvantage to not campaign door-to-door when the other side is. If we lose, it's probably because of that. I would probably go door-to-door with masks if I had the time. And yeah, we should be getting like good masks and going door to door. Honestly, there's almost no way to compete. Door to door is proven to be the #1 way to reach voters and impact voters, trailed by phone calls. So knocking on doors, it's just such an advantage that they don't care about killing themselves or others. With N95 masks, if we had done anything, if the government had done anything to provide and supply the PPE that we actually need to get along in this country, we'd be able to do this door-to-door campaigning as well with N95s, which actually protect the wearer as well as the other person. But it's just not the case. So with an N95, you could go canvassing, protect the other person, and if they didn't have a mask, you'd be safe. It's just not the way. Yushchenko has been there for 20 plus years like Putin. If anything, he is a more skilled autocrat than Xi Jinping. It doesn't seem that way because he's about to be ousted. Whereas the Communist Party don't view Xi Jinping as like the one man. Xi Jinping is representative of a Communist Party, and the Communist Party has been there since the 50s, since 51, ruling China with an authoritarian regime. Hong Kong would be independent if it could be like Taiwan. The UK actually had legal grounds to hold it permanently, but chose to give it up because it didn't want to go through the trouble of keeping it. The UK did not have legal grounds to hold Hong Kong permanently because it stole it in a war of colonialism, which basically everybody agrees is bad, and the UK was dismantling its empire for good reason, because it was evil. And so there was no way that they were going to be able to hold on to Hong Kong. I'm sorry, Dorian. Simon Sachs, are you going to change the fireplace in the background? Why? Should I? Michael Kaplan, I initially asked about 5 posts that you made on Newsfeed ago. Probably got lost as you post many things these days. I do post a lot, which is the basis for the lives. But if you could send me a message with these things, then I could keep track of them. UK should have held on to Hong Kong, then gave it independence like Canada. Yes, well, the indigenous people of Canada didn't have a government to demand the return of Canada. Hong Kong's an island off the coast of a nation of 1 billion people. Like, just not happening. Even if they had held Hong Kong, look, China was a nuclear power by the time that the UK gave Hong Kong back in 97. There's just no way. Like, you have this idea that the United Kingdom or all these imperial powers could just do what they wanted and people would accept it, but it's not true. Just look at the Falkland War. And yeah, the UK won the Falkland War, but they had to fight a war about it, right? And that was a very different situation than trying to hold Hong Kong against China. Michael Kaplan, I passed the New York State one the other day. That's what prompted my little rant against it. Many people will be upset that people are coming to their house in the middle of a pandemic. They might be. It depends who they are. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know. If they're not wearing masks, I think you're right. I think with N95 masks or like those visors, those big blockers, I think people would be fine with it, honestly. And they might talk through their door, but ultimately, I think we're at a disadvantage without door-to-door canvassing. I'm a big field guy in normal times. Yes, well, I'm even a big field guy right now, although I do understand the situation. Again, I think we're at a disadvantage as a result. Just got to make those calls, send those texts, and mail stuff. Simon Sachs put an article from LowHUD here, which is a Lower Hudson Valley publication, but I have no idea what it's about. Sorry, Simon. In any event, was there anything else I wanted to mention today? I don't think so. I think we went through pretty much everything. So that's about it. And with no more comments, I'll just check real fast. But otherwise, I'll happily bid folks a bientôt, because then I can get back to work, which for some reason seems to be taking over my life. Donald J. Trump State Park. Democrats want to rename it, but major obstacles remain. Yes, they do want to rename it, which is great. Wow. Facebook is all kinds of messed up. Oh, one thing I will mention, I suppose, is that school went back into session in many areas today, and Zoom had a big old outage. So for those of you who are hoping that remote education would go smoothly, and I don't know which ones of those that would be, because I suppose that was always kind of an impossible hope. It is not going smoothly. So there you go. Also, Melania destroyed the Rose Garden, or so I'm told. But honestly, it's her house for the moment. Like, she wants to rip up all of Jackie O's stuff. Like, I can get that people are upset, but really not much we can do about it. We just need to get new occupants who will plant nicer things. Anyway, with that said, tomorrow, tune in for a rundown of QAnon so that we can all be on the same page and be terrified about all these QAnon people winning elections, because QAnon is the scariest goddamn thing, like, in the world. It's absolutely nutso. And American democracy is on the line here, so let's all do our part to get Joe Biden elected. Even if you don't like Joe Biden, you gotta say, like, these QAnon folks should not be in power, and we should not empower them with a president who's likely to buy into their shenanigans. So, until tomorrow at 9, later. Dude. Hello, Live Club.